The city was just beginning to wake when Ethan Wells stepped out of his apartment, clutching a tray of coffee cups like they were priceless treasures. The early sunlight spilled over the narrow street, catching on the glossy windows of the little flower shop on the corner. Inside, Clara Moreno was arranging a bouquet of daisies, her movements so graceful they seemed choreographed. Ethan paused, watching her through the glass for a heartbeat too long. He'd seen her nearly every morning on his way to work, her warm laugh drifting through the open shop door, her calm, steady presence a stark contrast to his own restless energy. Today, though, was different. Today, he had a plan. In his hand was her favorite coffee order, oat milk, 2 sugars, and 3 swirls of caramel. He'd memorized it after overhearing her order at the cafe once, his heart thudding as he noted the way she smiled at the barista, her voice soft but certain. It was the perfect way to say hello, he thought, a simple gesture that might open the door to something more. But Ethan Wells was not known for his smoothness. His co-workers called him Captain Clumsy, and even he would admit that grace was not one of his talents. Still, he had hope. As he approached the shop, he rehearsed what he'd say. "Hi, I noticed you always order this coffee, so I thought." He didn't finish the thought. His foot caught on the uneven edge of the sidewalk, and in an instant, time slowed. The coffee cups tilted, his arms flailed, and then, splat. A cascade of caramel-scented coffee painted the pavement in dramatic arcs. Ethan froze, mortified. "No, no, no, no," he muttered, crouching to salvage what was left. One of the cups rolled into the gutter, leaking its contents like a wounded soldier. The sound of a soft laugh drifted from behind him. Turning, he saw Clara standing in the doorway of her shop, her arms crossed, an amused smile tugging at her lips. "You're watering the street?" she teased, tilting her head. Heat flooded Ethan's cheeks. Yes? No. This was supposed to be for you." He held up the one surviving cup, its lid crooked and dripping. "Your oat milk, 2 sugars, 3 swirls of caramel." Clara blinked, surprise. "You remembered my order?" Ethan's words tumbled out. "I overheard it once at the cafe, and I thought. I wasn't stalking you or anything. I just thought, maybe, you'd like a coffee." She chuckled, stepping forward to take the battered cup. "Well, it's not every day someone tries to drench the sidewalk for me." "That's oddly sweet." Ethan exhaled in relief. "So, you don't think I'm a complete disaster?" "Oh, you're definitely a disaster," she said with a grin, "but I think I like disasters." The tension broke, and Ethan laughed, the sound awkward but genuine. For the first time in weeks, he felt like maybe he hadn't completely ruined everything. Clara took a sip of the coffee, wincing at its lukewarm state but smiling anyway. "Thanks," she said softly. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he admitted, "though I was hoping for a smoother delivery." "Smooth is overrated," she said, and Ethan swore there was a spark in her eyes. That moment, brief as it was, set something in motion. Ethan walked away from the flower shop with sticky hands, a ruined pair of sneakers, and a heart that felt strangely light. He'd expected embarrassment, maybe even pity, but instead, Clara had laughed with him, not at him. The next morning, he found himself thinking of her smile again. That evening, as he sat in his apartment replaying the encounter, an idea took hold. He wanted to do something bold, something memorable. Clara deserved more than a spilled cup of coffee. She deserved a gesture that would make her laugh again. So Ethan borrowed a guitar from his friend Mark, a battered old thing with a missing string and stickers peeling from its body. He hadn't played guitar since college, but that didn't matter. He spent the entire afternoon strumming and singing off-key, his voice cracking as he practiced a love song he barely remembered. When night fell, Ethan found himself standing outside Clara's apartment building, the cool air sharp with autumn's arrival. His palms were sweaty, his heart pounding as he looked up at her window. "This is insane," he muttered. "Completely insane." But he started playing anyway. The melody was shaky, his fingers fumbling over the chords, but his voice was steady with determination. He poured everything he felt, the nervous admiration, the unexpected joy of her smile, the warmth of her laugh, into that imperfect song. A curtain in a window above him twitched. Ethan kept playing, hoping Clara was listening. Suddenly, a gruff voice barked, "What is this racket?" Ethan froze mid-chord. The curtain flew open, revealing not Clara but an elderly man with a scowl deep enough to rival storm clouds. "This is private property," the man roared. "Oh, sorry, sir," Ethan stammered, lowering the guitar. By now, other windows were opening, curious faces peering down. Someone clapped mockingly. A group of teenagers on the sidewalk started recording. Ethan's stomach dropped. Then, from the window next to the old man's, Clara appeared, her hair falling over her shoulders, her smile soft and amused. "Is this for me?" she called. Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes?" She laughed, a sound that made his humiliation worth it. "That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen," she said. "Ridiculous is kind of my specialty," Ethan said, rubbing the back of his neck. Clara leaned on the windowsill, her expression warm. "You're ridiculous, but brave. I'll give you that." And for the first time that night, Ethan felt like maybe his disaster of a plan wasn't such a disaster after all. That night, as he walked home carrying the guitar like a badge of honor, Ethan couldn't stop smiling. He'd made her laugh again, and this time, there was something softer in her eyes, a glimmer of curiosity, maybe even admiration. For Ethan, that was enough to keep going. To be continued? The next few days passed with a kind of cautious rhythm. Ethan found himself inventing excuses to pass by Clara's flower shop, sometimes buying a single daisy just to hear her laugh at his minimalist aesthetic. She didn't seem to mind. In fact, she often leaned on the counter, chin resting on her hand, smiling at his awkward attempts at conversation. One crisp Thursday morning, Clara finally surprised him. "So," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, "when are you going to ask me out?" Ethan blinked, completely caught off guard. Well, would you?" She laughed, rescuing him from his own tongue-tied panic. "I'm free Saturday night." "Perfect," he said, trying not to sound like a man who had just won the lottery. "Dinner at my place?" "Bold," she teased, her eyes sparkling. "What's on the menu?" Ethan puffed out his chest. "Something special." Clara raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Saturday arrived, and Ethan's apartment looked like a cooking show gone wrong. He had ambitiously chosen to make risotto, or risotto, as he kept accidentally calling it. The recipe was open on his phone, though the battery had died halfway through step 3. By the time Clara arrived, the kitchen resembled a war zone. "Wow," Clara said, stepping into the apartment, her nose twitching at the smell of something smoky. "You've really outdone yourself." Ethan, flour streaked across his cheek and apron, greeted her with a sheepish grin. "I might have underestimated the complexity of this dish." "Might?" she teased, surveying the chaos. Pans stacked precariously, sauce splattered on the counter, and what looked suspiciously like burnt rice in a pot. "I was going for gourmet rustic," Ethan said, grabbing a spoon to stir something that didn't look stirrable. "Gourmet rustic," Clara repeated with a grin, "more like apocalyptic chic." He groaned, running a hand through his already messy hair. "I wanted tonight to be perfect." Clara set her purse down and walked toward him, rolling up her sleeves. "Perfection is boring. Now scoot over, Captain Chaos. Let me help." Relieved, Ethan handed her the spoon, stepping aside as she took control. Clara moved with easy confidence, tasting the sauce, adjusting the heat, and calmly tossing in a handful of herbs. Within minutes, the smoky haze began to fade, replaced by a delicious aroma. "See?" she said, shooting him a playful smile. "Crisis averted." Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her work. "You're amazing." Clara didn't respond right away, but her lips curved into a smile as she stirred the pot. "You're not so bad yourself. Just, maybe not ready to open a restaurant." They worked side by side, laughter filling the small kitchen as they salvaged dinner together. At one point, Ethan attempted to flambe something, only to nearly set his sleeve on fire. Clara shrieked with laughter as he flailed around, patting out the small flame. "Note to self," Ethan said, panting, "fire is not my friend." "Or cooking," Clara teased, her eyes dancing. Finally, the risotto, or some version of it, was ready. Clara plated the food with surprising elegance, and they sat down to eat at his tiny kitchen table. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm, cozy, and oddly intimate. Halfway through the meal, Ethan managed to spill a spoonful of risotto down his shirt. Clara laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. "You're hopeless." He grabbed a napkin, blotting at the stain, but Clara stood, taking the napkin from his hand. "Here, let me," she said softly, leaning close to dab at his shirt. Ethan froze, suddenly hyper-aware of her proximity, the gentle scent of her perfume, the warmth of her hand resting briefly on his chest. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Clara's eyes flicked up to his, and something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of tension, of possibility. Then she cleared her throat, stepping back with a playful smile. "There, good as new." Ethan exhaled, trying to calm the rapid thudding of his heart. "Thanks," he said, his voice softer than usual. After dinner, as they cleaned up, Ethan pulled out his phone and put on some soft jazz music. Clara raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "A mood," he said, offering her his hand. "Dance with me." "In the kitchen?" she asked, amused. "Why not?" Clara hesitated for only a second before slipping her hand into his. He led her in a slow, awkward waltz, nearly tripping over his own feet. Clara giggled, resting her hand on his shoulder as he twirled her clumsily. "You're terrible at this," she teased. "I know," he said with a grin. "But I'm enjoying myself." "So am I," she admitted softly. They moved in small circles, surrounded by the mess they'd made, the faint smell of burnt rice still lingering in the air. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The world outside faded away, leaving just the two of them swaying under the dim kitchen light. For Ethan, it felt like the beginning of something real. Later, when Clara finally left for the night, she paused at the door, turning back to him with a smile that made his heart ache in the best way. "Tonight was fun," she said. "Even with the near fire and culinary disasters?" "Especially because of them," she replied, her eyes twinkling. Ethan grinned. "Then maybe next time, I'll try not to burn down the kitchen." Clara laughed, stepping out into the cool night air. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Clara," he whispered to himself as she walked away. And as he cleaned up the chaos, humming softly to the fading jazz music, he couldn't stop smiling. To be continued? By the time the weekend rolled around, Ethan found himself pacing his apartment, nervously adjusting the cuffs of a suit jacket he'd borrowed from his cousin. It was slightly too big, the sleeves brushing the tops of his hands, but tonight wasn't about fashion perfection. Tonight, he was taking Clara somewhere fancy, a charity gala hosted at a downtown ballroom. Clara had seemed surprised when he invited her. "You, at a gala?" she'd teased, her eyebrow arching. "I can be classy," he'd said, trying to sound confident. "You'll see." Now, standing at the edge of the ballroom floor, surrounded by glittering chandeliers and guests in elegant gowns, Ethan wasn't so sure. He tugged nervously at his tie, which he'd spent 20 minutes watching YouTube tutorials to get right. Clara, in contrast, looked effortlessly radiant in a simple dark green dress, her hair swept over one shoulder. She was breathtaking. "You look, wow," Ethan managed, the word slipping out before he could stop it. She smiled warmly. "You clean up pretty well yourself." "Thank you," he said, though his voice cracked slightly, making her laugh. They mingled awkwardly, Ethan fumbling through small talk with strangers while Clara navigated the crowd with ease. Just when he was beginning to relax, a crack of thunder echoed outside. The ballroom's massive windows rattled as a storm rolled in, lightning illuminating the sky. And then, snap! The entire room plunged into darkness. Gasps and murmurs spread through the guests as the chandeliers above flickered out. A storm outside howled against the glass, and for a moment, the grand ballroom felt more like a haunted castle. "Oh," Clara whispered beside him. Ethan immediately reached for her hand. "Stay close," he said, his voice steady. The sudden warmth of his hand in hers surprised her, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand lightly as they navigated through the murmuring crowd. Somewhere, a security guard's flashlight bobbed like a distant firefly, but Ethan spotted a side door leading to a lounge. "Come on," he said, guiding her through. The lounge was quiet, dimly lit by the soft glow of a fireplace. They sank onto a leather sofa, the sound of rain pelting the windows surrounding them. Ethan shrugged off his jacket and draped it over Clara's shoulders. "Better?" he asked. Clara smiled, pulling the jacket around her. Much. For a while, they simply sat there, listening to the storm rage outside. The flickering firelight cast soft shadows over Clara's face, making her seem even more ethereal. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to ignore how loudly his heart was beating. "Well," Clara said, breaking the silence, "this is definitely more exciting than a normal gala." "Yeah," Ethan chuckled. "Who needs chandeliers when you have atmospheric candlelight and thunder?" She laughed softly. "You're handling this better than I expected." "What did you expect? That I'd run screaming into the storm?" "Honestly, maybe a little." He grinned. "Nope, I'm staying put. I've got a beautiful date and a fire. Feels like a win to me." Clara's cheeks warmed at the compliment, though she tried to hide it. She leaned back against the couch, letting out a content sigh. "You know," she said softly, "I wasn't sure about you at first." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Really? Why?" "You seemed chaotic," she admitted with a smile. "But now, I think I like that about you." He tilted his head, intrigued. "You like my chaos?" "I do," she said simply. Ethan's chest swelled with warmth at her words. The storm outside rumbled again, but in that cozy lounge, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. A few days later, Ethan decided to test another theory he'd been quietly working on: that mundane errands could be turned into adventures. Which is why Clara found herself standing in the middle of a bustling grocery store while Ethan, pushing a squeaky-wheeled cart, declared dramatically, "We embark now on a noble quest." Clara raised an eyebrow. "A quest?" "Of course. A battle against confusing labels and narrow aisles. A test of courage in the frozen food section. And," he added solemnly, "a war with that one shelf that always wobbles." Clara couldn't help but laugh. "You're ridiculous." "That's my brand," he said proudly. They navigated the store with a mix of genuine shopping and comedic flair. In the cereal aisle, Ethan dramatically compared brands like they were priceless treasures. Clara played along, feigning deep contemplation over which oatmeal brand had the superior texture. But their fun turned chaotic in the pasta section, where Ethan accidentally knocked an entire row of spaghetti boxes onto the floor. "Abort mission," he whispered as they scrambled to pick them up, laughing so hard they drew stares from other shoppers. Moments later, a jar of pickles slipped from his grasp and landed squarely on his foot. He winced in pain, hopping on one leg as Clara tried, and failed, to stifle her laughter. "I'm fine," he groaned dramatically. "Just mortally wounded." "You're hopeless," Clara said through giggles, but her eyes were soft as she crouched down to help him. They finally made it to the checkout line, their cart an odd assortment of random items they'd picked up in their quest. Ethan looked at her, grinning. "See? Grocery shopping can be thrilling." Clara shook her head but smiled. "You're ridiculous," she repeated. "And yet," he said playfully, "you keep hanging out with me." She met his gaze, her smile softening. "Yeah," she admitted, "I guess I do." Something about that moment, her quiet admission, the warmth in her voice, made Ethan's chest tighten with a feeling he couldn't quite name yet. All he knew was that he didn't want this adventure, ridiculous as it was, to end. As they left the store, laughing under the streetlights with their grocery bags swinging, Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. He wasn't just falling for Clara, he was falling into a world where even spilled pasta and pickle mishaps felt like magic. And for the first time, Clara realized she was enjoying every bit of it too. To be continued?
The duality of the pharaohs. The pharaoh's story is one of contradictions. They were gods and men, warriors and priests, tyrants and visionaries. Their power was absolute, yet their lives were riddled with paranoia and betrayal. Magical amulets and curses could not shield them from assassination plots or disease. They lived in palaces of gold but often died young, their corpses preserved in painstaking rituals that could not stop decay. Their reigns were as much about performance as politics. Grand festivals, temple rituals, and colossal statues reinforced their divine image, yet behind this spectacle, pharaohs carried immense psychological burdens. They were the guardians of Ma, the cosmic order, and every famine, rebellion, or military defeat was seen as their personal failure. The weight of an entire universe rested on their shoulders. Some pharaohs embraced this divine role with ruthless determination, while others struggled under its expectations. Hatshepsut and Akhenaten rewrote tradition to assert their vision, only to face erasure and condemnation after death. Ramses II turned his name into legend through relentless self-promotion, while Tutankhamun's obscurity ironically granted him eternal fame. The pharaoh's obsession with the afterlife speaks volumes about the human condition. Their monumental tombs were not just expressions of wealth, but symbols of hope that life's achievements and relationships could transcend mortality. Their culture poured unimaginable creativity into bridging the gap between life and death, leaving behind some of the most iconic wonders the world has ever seen. The eternal fascination. Even after Egypt fell under foreign rule, first to Assyrians, then Persians, Greeks, and Romans, the mystique of its kings endured. Temples continued to stand, pyramids towered over the desert, and the hieroglyphs carved into stone whispered stories no one could yet read. Centuries later, when scholars cracked the code of hieroglyphics, the pharaohs' voices emerged from silence. Their prayers, victories, and fears were revealed, reminding the world that these figures, often seen as distant gods, were deeply human. They laughed, loved, plotted, and mourned like anyone else, even as they commanded nations and built wonders. Today, the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb and the towering statues of Ramses II inspire awe across the globe. The pharaohs have achieved a kind of immortality that even they could not have imagined. Their names are spoken thousands of years after their deaths, their monuments studied and revered by millions. In this way, their quest for eternity succeeded, not through magic spells or sacred rituals, but through the enduring curiosity of humankind. The story of the pharaohs is not just ancient history, it is a mirror, reflecting humanity's eternal struggle with power, mortality, and meaning. We may no longer worship kings as gods, but their legacy lingers as a cautionary tale and a source of wonder. The Nile still flows past the ruins of temples and tombs, whispering their secrets. The pharaohs may have been mortal, but in stone, story, and memory, they remain eternal.
"What in the world?" she murmured. Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding a chewed-up slipper. "Surprise! Meet Sir Wigglebit." "Sir Wigglebit?" Clara repeated, laughing. "He's our new roommate," Ethan said proudly. The puppy barked happily and promptly knocked over a mug of coffee, splattering the floor. Clara yelped and grabbed a towel, laughing as the puppy skidded around the kitchen like a whirlwind. "Ethan," she scolded playfully, "you can't just adopt a puppy without warning me." "Correction," he said, kneeling to scoop up the squirming pup. "I didn't adopt him without warning you. I surprised you. Totally different." Clara shook her head, unable to stop smiling. Sir Wigglebit wriggled in Ethan's arms, licking his face, and Clara felt a warmth bloom in her chest. Chaos had officially entered her life, and she didn't hate it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of puppy antics. Sir Wigglebit chewed on socks, knocked over a stack of books, and tried to eat a houseplant. Clara and Ethan chased him around the apartment, laughing so hard their stomachs hurt. By evening, they were both sprawled on the couch, utterly exhausted. The puppy finally settled at their feet, snoring softly. Ethan leaned his head back, his eyes half closed. "You know," he murmured, "this might be the best day of my life." Clara glanced at him, her heart softening. "Even after Sir Wigglebit destroyed your shoes?" "Especially after that," he said with a tired smile. She chuckled and leaned back, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the city outside blending with the soft puppy snores. Ethan shifted slightly, his voice low. "Clara? I really like you." She turned her head to look at him. His eyes were half-lidded, his voice drowsy but sincere. "I know I'm chaotic and ridiculous, and I spilled coffee and set off fire alarms and probably embarrassed you in front of an entire park today." He trailed off, his lips quirking into a sleepy smile. "But I just really like you." Clara's chest tightened. She reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're ridiculous," she whispered. "But that's why I like you." His smile widened, his eyes closing. "Best compliment ever," he murmured. She laughed softly, leaning her head back against him. "You're lucky you're cute when you're half asleep." "Lucky you like chaos," he mumbled, already drifting off. Clara watched him for a moment, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace settle over her. The apartment was a mess, the puppy was already chewing on something again, and Ethan snored softly beside her. And yet, she wouldn't have traded this moment for anything. The next morning, Sunlight streamed through the window as they sat on the couch, sipping coffee and laughing at the previous day's absurdity. "You realize," Clara said, "that you've officially set the bar too high. No one can top a rented elephant." Ethan smirked. "Guess I'll just have to keep being ridiculous." Clara rolled her eyes but smiled, her heart full. "I'm okay with that." He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Then let's promise something," he said softly. "Promise what?" "That we'll keep doing ridiculous things. That we'll keep laughing. That even when life gets messy, we'll choose this." Clara's throat tightened, but she squeezed his hand. "Deal." Outside, the city buzzed with life. Inside, their little apartment was a haven of warmth, laughter, and chaos. A kind of chaos Clara had never realized she needed. Sir Wigglebit barked suddenly, leaping onto the couch and knocking over Ethan's coffee. They both shrieked and scrambled for napkins, laughing uncontrollably as the puppy wiggled happily between them. And just like that, the future didn't feel scary anymore. It felt exciting, messy, unpredictable, and utterly beautiful.